Welcome back to the Sports Complex here on a Friday afternoon. Getting ready for the weekend. The weather may not be great, but it is a Friday, so it must feel good. It's a 512 Friday, too. Playing your local music you can check out all around town during the weekend. We'll get in to some college basketball talk. Texas has another big test ahead of them. Coming up this weekend, we'll get a little more NBA talk as well. Basketball in that first segment there. Get into the coaching carousel starting to wrap up. Now the coordinators are getting in there. We'll get into that. East-West Shrine Bowl was last night. Senior Bowl is Saturday. Pro Bowl is happening, and the skills competition was last night. Didn't even realize it was happening. But all that is coming up. We'll get into all of that. You know, maybe some quarterback movement in the NFL, some questions with where the OCs are going, all of that will come up on the show today and a whole lot more, including your text messages. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. 512-447-3776 is where you can join the show, be a part of it, have our conversations on there, talk about what your hot takes are, what you think it needs to happen in basketball and football and whatever else, your questions. If you're worried, if you're wondering about something, we'll try and help you out there as well because you guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails. And, of course, Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the Day. We'll get to that here in a little bit as well. It was a good night last night. Enjoyed a nice Thursday night. Ready for a Friday night now. We did enjoy the East-West Shrine Bowl last night. Ryan Watts, the only Longhorn playing in the game. JT Sanders was a late scratch to the game. Jonathan Brooks there, but not participating, clearly, because he is still recovering from his injuries. Ryan Watts has a decent game, does what he needs to do. He gets 3 tackles, only targeted his direction twice. He allows 1 completion on the 2 targets that went his way. Not a lot of action for him, but a good performance from Ryan Watts. There was the moment when he jogged off the field, I believe in the fourth quarter. He jogs off the field, and everybody's a little worried that he's jogging off and go, man, Ryan Watts can't stay on the field. This won't help his draft stock if he gets hurt in the East-West Bowl. And then he comes back out and afterwards apparently needed a bathroom break. And that was all it was, just need a bathroom break and during the game. So it was not hurt, but a decent performance from Ryan Watts. We'll see more action on Saturday for the Senior Bowl. T'Vondre Sweat and Christian Jones performing in that game as well. That should be a good game to watch to see those two guys. Christian Jones has looked good at the drills and the practices. T'Vondre Sweat has looked really good. It'll be interesting to see if he can go in. If they're trying to double team T'Vondre Sweat in the Senior Bowl, or if they let him go one-on-one in some of these and just kind of let him go and be the beast he can be. We'll see what T'Vondre Sweat can do as he gets into the game today, or gets into the game on Saturday at the Senior Bowl. Let's get into some Big 12 basketball talk, and of course, Texas. Actually, you know what? Before we get into that, we should mention, because I don't want to leave them out, the Texas women's team did do a great job last night. Texas women's basketball does get a big win over Baylor, 67-55. It was a game that was kind of back and forth. A good start for Texas. Baylor comes back and takes the lead. They're fighting around halftime. Somewhere in the third quarter, Texas women start to pull away in that game and don't look back. Madison Booker gets 22 points. Aaliyah Moore adds 19 points and 7 rebounds. But really the defense was key for Texas. They hold Baylor to 35% shooting, 23% from behind the arc, and really just start pounding them in the paint, not allowing Baylor to get as many threes as they would like. I believe they went 7 for 30, so really going after the three-point line was Baylor. The defense was good enough to keep them out from hitting those shots, and Texas wins the points in the paint battle 38-18, enough to go get a big win for Texas over Baylor in a matchup where this is where Waco wants to send Texas off to the SEC and say that they're still the dominant women's basketball powerhouse, even though Kim Mulkey has left, that they're still the team. And Vic Schaefer is saying, no, the best women's basketball team in Texas is Texas, and showing it there with the big 12-point win over the Baylor Bears. Good matchup there. We're hoping to see the same type of action on Saturday for Texas as they take on number 25 TCU in this stretch of games. We say in the Big 12 it's a gauntlet. You lost the games earlier on. You lost the game to Tech. You lost the game to UCF. You lost the game to West Virginia. Texas Tech is turning out to be a pretty good team, but UCF and West Virginia, you really could not have lost those. Those were games you really needed to win. And so now you're at a point where, a game like TCU like this that maybe, on the road, this is a 50-50. You don't necessarily need it. You need it now. You need as many of these games as you can get to get where you need to be. So you are a sure thing in the tournament. So you are automatically, everybody knows you're in. You're not going into the Big 12 tournament looking for that fight. And the reality is TCU's playing their best basketball of the season right now. They just beat Baylor. They just beat Tech. They're averaging 83.7 points a game, which is another one of those teams that don't necessarily match up great with Texas, or Texas doesn't match up great with them. Is they had this problem at BYU, is that TCU can score. They've got 3 guards that play really good, and, even though those are not the leading scorers on the team, they are kind of what drives the engine of this team. But TCU averaging 83.7 is where you have to say for Texas, again, you're not a team at Texas that is probably going to put up 80 points in the game. So to start off, your number one key is to play some defense with intensity for 40 minutes. And we know that we've seen this team, the game against Houston, they didn't play with the intensity they needed in the first half. You go into this TCU game, and at BYU, they did not play with intensity at the beginning of the game. And we've seen it over and over again that they continue to not show up and bring the fight that they really need. And hopefully Houston was the wake-up call for this Texas team. And hopefully Houston is the wake-up call of now you can show them on a real scale. Did you know how hard that game was and how much you're beat up and everything? We should be doing that to every opponent. Texas should be the same type of built team as a Houston, where you build on defense, where you go out there and you fight for every rebound, because you do have guys that can get off the ground and go get those rebounds. You do have guys that are athletes that can go after and get the ball. You have athletes who can stay in front of guys and play defense like Houston does. So you need to be more physical like that and bring that game against TCU. You're looking at 3 guards for TCU, Michael Peavy, Jameer Nelson Jr., and Trevion Tennyson. Michael Peavy is going to be an interesting one. He's 6'8", so it brings into the problem of IT Horton is going to be kind of the guy who has to deal with that. Tyrese Hunter can't get on him, and that will lead to can IT Horton and then Kendall Weaver, who are going to give up some size there to Peavy, are they going to be able to get in and get the process they need and be able to get enough defense to keep him, not dominating the game, not let him get going and get hot in the game. Emmanuel Miller is actually their leading scorer. That is going to be a really fun matchup to watch, as well as Dylan Mitchell versus Emmanuel Miller. They're both going to be in that power forward kind of spot, so you can see that matchup a lot, where Dylan Mitchell is going to have to stay in front and keep him out, make them rely on their guards, make them rely on shooting, and, your best case scenario usually is requiring them to take more, the further away the shots, the harder the shot selection. That's your best shot playing defense. You can't let them get in the paint. You can't let them beat you around the post. Ernest Uday is going to be their starting center. They kind of rotate. He's their biggest guy at 6'11". They have some other guys around 6'9", 6'7", that Dylan Dessou will be bumping with. It's not like the height problem is going to be such a big deal for Texas in this game, which has been for some of the Big 12 matchups they've had, is the height has really been an issue for Texas. However, this one, Texas is going to be able to play a little bit more matchup in size, other than, of course, for Peavy, who is just going to be able to, he'll be able to get what he wants on Kendall Weaver, IT Horton, who's going to be picking up that assignment for most of the game, you would figure. So Dylan Dessou is going to need to be big in this game. If you're putting him off on kind of a rotating plethora of guys for TCU, who's going to be in there, what he can do inside, getting him the ball, getting him active early in the game, allowing him to open it up a little bit more, and then trying to find places for Max Abmas to get his scores as well. You'd like to be able to do that on the offensive end. You don't want to let TCU get going too fast. You like to slow the game down better, and I know Texas in the half court, their offense isn't great, but you want to slow them down at least defensively by not allowing them to get straight to the rim. So rim protection for Dylan Mitchell, for him to be able to be rim protector and stay on Emmanuel Miller is going to be tough. So Dylan Dessou is going to have to do that. Caden Shedrick, when he comes in, is going to have to do that as well. You have to be on team effort to try and keep guys away from the rim, because I believe they're going to try and take the same attempt that BYU did early against Texas and try and go right at Texas to make them bounce off of some of their defenders. And if you bounce off of Emmanuel Miller, that's a good way to start getting beat early. So they're going to be trying to mess with Dylan Mitchell, and that's going to be a big game for him. It's a big game for Dylan Mitchell because you're going up against their leading scorer, your position, and you're going to have to be a rim protector and a rebounder. We saw he did a lot in the second half. He needs to make his free throws. We know he needs to improve. But, when you're the NBA talent on the floor, when everybody's giving that you're going to be in the NBA draft, you have to be the guy that understands that you've got the target on your back. They all want to have a highlight reel making you look silly. So this is a big game for Dillon Mitchell to come out with intensity. Sometimes he is not necessarily as into the game early. We've seen him at points where when you get him involved in the offensive end, he really can star defensively as well and rebound well. But when he starts to just stand out on the offensive end and get moved away and they're not guarding him and he's out on the three-point line and they're just, they're sagging off of him and there's nothing he can really do. And those games, you have to find ways to get him involved so that mentally he's ready to go and he wants to play on both ends of the court, because reality is defense spurs offense. If you play good defense, your offense usually gets better. However, a lot of players, it's just human instinct. If you're not part of the offensive game plan, you don't necessarily want to walk down and do the hard part if you're not going to get to do the fun part and rim and go attack the rim, which is what Dillon Mitchell does really well. So I think, if you're Rodney Terry, you need to get Dillon Mitchell involved in the offense because you need him to be playing at a high level in this game if you want to go in and pull off an upset on the road again, where we say it's very hard to pull off upsets in the Big 12. This is going to be another tough one for Texas, but if they're able to come out with that intensity they played the second half of Houston, understand what they need to do early to not allow TCU to come out and get the upper hand and get one or two of their guys hot. If they're able to do that, then Texas has a good shot here to go pull an upset and get another big win. But a big game for Texas on Saturday. Another huge game in the Big 12 on Saturday is going to be number 4 Houston at number 8 Kansas. A top 10 matchup, 2 top teams in the Big 12. This is one of the matchups when Houston joined the conference that you really were looking forward to. And really, this is a game where Kansas is going to have to show that they're getting over their struggles that they haven't seemed to have been able to get over. And some of the defensive teams in the Big 12, and especially the physical ones, have been pushing back on them that Kansas maybe is a little softer than they need to be this year. That Hunter Dickinson came in, and he doesn't necessarily want to bump around with those guys. He was playing a different style of basketball at Michigan, and now he's coming to Kansas, and he's going to have to deal with that. Houston can push Kansas for what they struggle at. And that's what Houston's going to come in and do. It's what they did against Texas. It's what they do against everybody. They go and make you work really hard, trying to find shots, trying to give you hard shots, and you have to make those. Kansas, though, have a size advantage, something that Texas didn't really have don't have it on anybody pretty much. But Texas didn't have that in the matchup with Houston. Kansas does have more size on Houston. So if you're able to use your size, if you can box out and use your height and your ability to go after rebounds and not let Houston get those second half points, then you give Kansas a better shot in there. Kevin McCullough Jr., DeJuan Harris Jr., both have been turning the ball over a little bit more than they'd like to. You have to be able to clean that up as you're bringing the ball down the court against a Houston team that's going to be pressuring you the whole time. This may be a big matchup. Houston seems like they're getting their game together and playing a little bit better right now, and Kansas is a little sloppy. So you could see an upset here, and I guess it's not upset because it's number 4 and number 8, but it is an upset in the fact that you're going into Kansas. Anytime you go into Kansas and win, it's pretty much an upset. So Houston could pull off a big one there. Also on Saturday, we get number 12 Iowa State versus number 18 Baylor. Iowa State is going to go after Baylor in the paint. Iowa State's going to go after Baylor early and often to get inside and get points because Baylor's defense just hasn't been really where it needs to be this season. They're going to continue to attack Baylor for the rest of the season, trying to get inside, trying to get after them. And Baylor is going to have to use that home court. Baylor really needs to use the home court advantage to try and find any way they can to get as many points as you can on the board against an Iowa State team whose defense is playing pretty high level right now. Baylor's struggling a little bit. They lose to Texas. They've lost a few games. They need to be able to pick it up right now and get a win at home. Use that home court advantage to bring back the energy. But another one of those road upsets. You're talking about 3 games where the road team can come in and make an impact. It'll be a fun Saturday of watching games. Of course, we also have Duke and UNC, which is one of the best rivalry games in sports. Always a blast to watch those 2 teams. They're both really good again this year, so that'll be a blast to watch that game as well in college basketball. Let's talk a little NBA before we hit our poll of the day. Pelicans are playing at the Spurs tonight. Spurs also have a game with the Cavs, going to be at home in San Antonio. But tonight you may get a Zion versus Wemby. Zion is a game-time decision, as is Keldon Johnson for the Spurs. If Keldon Johnson doesn't play, it becomes hard with the Spurs just not having enough depth to be able to compete for a long period of time. And the Pelicans are very, adept at depth. They have a lot of depth in New Orleans. So much so that at the trade deadline, they are a team that is a player to unload somebody or try and unload a couple guys and turn them into one good player. That is something you could see from the Pelicans at the trade deadline, but we could see Zion versus Wemby, two of the most talked about first-round picks. That's always a good matchup. And then you get the next night Evan Mobley and Jared Allen versus Wemby. That is another great matchup. Those guys are both also game-time decisions, so we'll see if they end up playing. It's that 65-game rule, though. Everybody is trying to get to that 65 games. If they can get there. We also have the Raptors at the Rockets and the Rockets at the Timberwolves. They are playing a Friday-Sunday, so not a back-to-back for the Rockets, taking on a Raptors team that is not in full tank mode. They still have players that want to go in there and win. They still have a Scotty Barnes, who's a really good basketball player. They have some good talent there, but not enough after trading away Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. So that is a game where the Rockets need to win that at home, and then you go and take on the best team in the West, or one of the best teams in the West, in the Timberwolves. That is going to be a tough game for the Rockets. Şengün is dealing with some small injuries as well. We'll see if he plays both games Friday and Sunday, but a tough matchup on Sunday for the Rockets against the Timberwolves, but a really good litmus test. If you're able to go out there and, we'll see Dylan Brooks trying to slow down Anthony Edwards in there as well. Karl Anthony Towns has been playing really well recently as well. And for Mavericks fans, you get a matchup against the Bucks. The Bucks will be at the Mavericks on Saturday. We don't know if Kyrie Irving will be back for that. A number of players for Dallas on their injury report. Luka should be back for that game as well. But if you get Kyrie and Luka in that game, we could see some good action of, Kyrie versus Damian Lillard, or Damian Lillard versus Luka Doncic, and the scoring this is two guys who can score at a high clip. Anytime you get Giannis in the game, it is going to be fun. MVP versus someone in Luka who a lot of people believe could be an MVP at some point soon. So that'll be a fun matchup to watch there. We mentioned it at the very end of the show, but if you didn't see that, the Rockets did make a trade yesterday. They traded away Victor Oladipo and 3 second-round picks and end up with Steven Adams. Victor Oladipo has not played this season after suffering an injury last season. It is not known if he will end up playing at all this season. I don't think he probably will, and if he does, it'll probably be on a buyout and not playing at Memphis. They just kind of want to unload the Steven Adams contract, pick up some picks. Steven Adams out for the season as well, dealing with consistent knee injuries. So he is going to come back next season, but he does add pieces for a Rockets team that is rebuilding to give them a piece where they are able to do this at the trade deadline, get something back for a Victor Oladipo expiring contract. They get a guy in Steven Adams that I think will be a good fit for them next season, especially the Ime Udoka way. If he's able to stay healthy, will be a really good addition of bringing physicality and rebounding to that Rockets team. So a good trade there. We also got to report today that Rich Paul has shut down all the rumors about LeBron James possibly being traded from the Los Angeles Lakers. He has been in talks, or the team, fans, and everybody has been in speculation that with the Lakers' struggles, that this may be time, that there's not really a lot that anybody's necessarily dying to go get a D'Angelo Russell. The guys they want are guys you don't necessarily want to trade. So with AD and LeBron, where's the value? Who can you get out of there? And with all the money tied up in LeBron, maybe it'd be time for him to move on and you move him to a new team and see where he goes. But apparently, Rich Paul has shut down his agent, Rich Paul, LeBron James. Of course, LeBron has no trade and he's not going anywhere. But says all of that is hogwash, that there are not talks inside, and none of it matters because LeBron's not going anywhere. Those trade deadline, of course, is next Thursday. So all of that is heating up. All right, let's get to Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the day.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the day on the Horn.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the day today on the text line, 512-447-3776. 512-447-3776 is the text line number if you want to join the conversation. And the poll of the day today, I want to ask you, and this is kind of out there. It's going to be, a lot of different answers you can give for this one. Because we're going to say any team. We'll say college football team, pro football team, pro basketball team, college basketball team. If you want to talk baseball as well, You can go with that. And if I'm going to ask you, if you could add one player to your team, so you say I can get one guy. So because we're talking about the trade deadline and everything that could possibly happen in the NBA, I want to say if you could add one guy to your team, you can go out and pick anybody. So if you're a Cowboys fan and you say, I want a quarterback, what quarterback do you want? And maybe we'll try and, in our head, figure out, a random, unlikely, impossible way to get that person on the team. But I like a little fun on a Friday to go, who's the person that you could take anybody on your team? And it has to be an active player now. You can't say, well, I'd be, Texas, I'd take Vince Young back right now. That's not what I'm saying. But if you want to go, what's the player that when you watch, you say, that's the best player, I want him on my team. They fit just a need we have, and that's the person I want to get in. Who would that person be that you would add to your team? Let me know on the text line, 512-447-3776. You want to talk some NBA? You want to talk some college basketball? You ready for the weekend? You think that you got all these predictions ready for the games for college basketball? If you've got your Pro Bowl and Senior Bowl predictions in too, send those in, 512-447-3776. We're going to come back. We're going to hit up some sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Robbie from this morning, and we'll keep the conversation rolling right here on the Sports Complex in the Horn with 109 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn on a 512 Friday, playing the local music that you can go check out around town this weekend. Enjoy the scene. Enjoy supporting Austin music. This is Transit Method, and they're playing tonight at Hotel Vegas. You can check out Transit Method tonight at Hotel Vegas. Some cool stuff there. Let's get on. Text line's open. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. Poll of the day. We're asking you if you could add one player to your team. It's got to be someone who's playing now. You got to think of it as a trade or a transfer or whatever it would be. If you could add one player to your team, any sport, who would you add? Baseball, football, basketball? Who would you add? Because you're thinking, the reason I'm thinking about this today is because of LeBron James talk and everything. That for so long, the answer in basketball would have been, well, I'll add LeBron James. He's the best player in basketball. I don't think that's the case anymore. But I was thinking about it. So who is the guy? And if we get common answers, but if you got it, tell me who, tell me why if you want to in there too. 512-447-3776. We're going to play some sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B weekday mornings right here on the Horn. It's a Hook 'em Up replay with Rob Babers going in about Dan Quinn and his coaching and who may be the next DC for the Cowboys. Also a little draft talk as well in there here on the Sports Complex.
Okay, I want to get to the Dallas Cowboys candidates for their defensive coordinator job because, honestly, I think there are like 10 different names that could be legitimate candidates for incredible candidates for the defensive coordinator vacancy for the Cowboys. Before we get to that, though, something that I heard the other day I thought was interesting. Now, Caleb Williams is, by almost every projection, going to be the number one overall pick. Like, honestly, I haven't seen anything different. And that's been for like 2 years. For the last 2 years, he's been considered to be the number one overall pick in the NFL draft. But recently, there have been some rumors that maybe Chicago won't draft a quarterback. That's out there. Even Ty believes they could do something as stupid as not draft a quarterback, and it's possible. They could. But also, or that Caleb Williams may not want to play in Chicago just because of their terrible track record and history with quarterbacks. And if they right now they may not have the structure, coaching staff, personnel in place to help him achieve and reach his ultimate level of success as a young quarterback. They may hold him back because organizationally they're just a bit of a fustercluck. Here's Colin Cowherd earlier this week saying he's got sources out there in Cali. He's a big USC fan, talking about how he thinks Caleb Williams' dad may be steering this ship in conversation in a different way. Here it is, Cowherd.
Some concerns here that Dad's a little too involved. Now, dads are very, very involved in high school and college quarterbacking. So that's just part of the new world we live in. But I still contend, you're going to think I'm nuts here. I do think it's possible that Washington trades up and Chicago allows Washington to trade up because Caleb and his group do not want to go to Chicago. He's from the D.C. area. I think Dan Quinn is considered the big concern for Caleb Williams, and you have to admit this. Where you land matters. Chicago has never developed a star quarterback.
Okay. You did mention Dan Quinn there. They got the number 2 overall pick. There's some belief that, first of all, Chicago, I don't know if they're interested in drafting a quarterback. They should be, but Ty's brought up a good point that they've had some bad decisions about quarterback in the recent history of that franchise. And right now, some of their moves are sending mixed messages, mixed signals about what they're going to do for the future. Are they going to trade Justin Fields? Are they going to reinvest in Justin Fields? Whatever's going to happen there. They could be open to potentially trading that number 1 overall pick. And if they were, it'd be the Commanders most likely that could get it because they're right behind them. And if he's from D.C., and maybe that's something
from that area, the Maryland area.
So maybe they can make a move if Chicago's not interested. But he may not want to go to Chicago. And if he wants to go to Washington instead of go to Chicago, then he could pull one of those Eli Manning, Deion Sanders clout cards where I ain't playing for you.
Well, remember, John Elway and Deion had baseball.
They had
leverage
baseball.
Play.
Great point.
Manning was a Manning. And had Archie.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, if you're the Bears, to go back one pick and you still get Drake May or your pick of quarterback.
You get a boatload of picks
and
for that one.
You can get a king's ransom from Washington to get Caleb Williams, which with a new owner and they're looking to rebrand that team to get a star like Caleb Williams to go with Dan Quinn would be a big get. But yeah, we'll see. That's interesting. I saw that too. That he wants to play with either Washington or Vegas. With
that
things I
makes
read
sense.
about Caleb Williams.
Yeah, Vegas makes sense just because of branding wise.
And that's where Cliff Kingsbury is now.
And that's a good point you bring that up, because Cliff Kingsbury is on the record for saying that Caleb Williams is the most talented quarterback that he's ever coached. Now, he recruited Kyler Murray, or that he's ever seen as a young quarterback. He's recruited and coached Kyler Murray, and he recruited and coached Patrick Mahomes. And he's saying Caleb Williams is the most talented young quarterback that he's ever coached. And Cliff Kingsbury knows his stuff. He knows quarterbacks really well. And there's talk that Caleb Williams' dad and Caleb Williams really love Cliff Kingsbury. So I wonder if there could be a move trying to get Vegas to
Vegas has the 8th
trade up to get somewhere close to where they could draft Caleb Williams if they bring in Cliff Kingsbury.
The Bears are dumb enough to trade out of that pick and give up on that talent.
They are.
That's on them. But yes, I mean, Vegas would have to go up from 8 to 1. But if you're Vegas, you've got really good pass rushers. You've got a pretty good team. You need a quarterback. You need a quarterback, and now you've got Antonio Pierce with Cliff Kingsbury. That would be interesting. But obviously, Washington would only have to go up 1 pick to make that happen, and wouldn't have to give up as much as to go up from 8 to 1.
Yeah, no, eight. Crazy enough, you're actually drafting too late to get one of those top QBs. You got to move up into right now the top 3.
Yeah, you do.
'cause
They're probably going 1, 2,
2, and 3.
Especially with the teams there. Washington, Chicago, and New England all need quarterbacks.
Yeah, so that's out there. Just it's buzzing right now that Caleb Williams just doesn't want to play in Chicago, but he may not have to worry about that if Chicago doesn't want to draft a quarterback, which we also at this point are uncertain about. Okay, let's talk about the Cowboys and their defensive coordinator vacancy. Ty, do you have this audio ready from Ian Rappaport on NFL Network? He is reporting that an in-house hire is probably most likely for the Cowboys, but also now that very same in-house hire, he reported that earlier, but this clip is him saying that very same in-house hire that is the odds-on favorite to be the next DC for the Cowboys is also the odds-on favorite to be the next DC for Dan Quinn in Washington.
Now, the Cowboys have an opening at defensive coordinator. I would also expect, as colleague Steve Weiss mentioned, Joe Witt to go with Dan Quinn as the defensive coordinator. He's currently Cowboys' secondary coach, but now a new opening in Dallas as well.
All right, so Clarence Hill Jr. and Calvin Watkins both reported that Joe Witt Jr. is on record for saying the Cowboys' defensive coordinator job, it was his dream job. All right, and this is a quote from a few years ago. My 2 dream jobs when I started off, and this has stayed the same. I wanted to be the head coach of South Florida or the DC of the Dallas Cowboys. That was when I was back at Louisville. So his dream job is open, but he is a Dan Quinn guy and a Dan Quinn disciple. So does he want to follow Dan Quinn or want to stay with the Cowboys? It looks like he is right now, at least David Moore of the Dallas Morning News reporting that he is the front runner to get the job with the Dallas Cowboys as their DC. So he's the front runner for both positions.
Yeah.
DC with Dan Quinn, DC with the Cowboys.
Keep an eye on that. And here's a tweet I just saw, Rod, from a report from @David Moore of the Dallas Morning News that the Cowboys are interviewing Mike Vrabel for their DC vacancy next week.
That's smart.
That is smart.
That's if that's indeed the case.
That
That's
would
smart.
indicate maybe they know Joe Witt wants to go with Dan Quinn to Washington. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a situation right now that I don't know what either side's waiting on, if that is your number one choice. Now, if the Cowboys want to interview Mike Vrabel and do their due diligence, maybe that's why they have not named Joe Witt Jr. the DC. And if that's the case, he's probably going to leave.
Yeah.
Because I imagine right now he's probably whoever offers him first.
Well, if you're Joe Witt Jr., you're going to take the defensive coordinator position that's offered to you.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't know if it's coming from the Cowboys.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
They're going to talk to Mike Vrabel and Ron Rivera and some of these other candidates, which is what the Cowboys should do. Same time, if you're Joe Witt and you have an offer sitting on the table, you got to take it.
You got to take that.
Especially with a coach you know very well and know the system, and there would be immediate chemistry there because you already have that chemistry.
Yeah, and so it's been reported by multiple sources that Witt is expected to follow Dan Quinn. Even got that from a source with Washington as well on their side that they believe that he's going to follow Dan Quinn. So we'll be looking at a vacancy definitely for the Cowboys. So just really quickly to go through some of the names. I think John Keim is the reporter who said the name I heard Quinn had told teams he'd bring in as DC, multiple teams, was Joe Witt Jr. So apparently that's been his guy from the jump. Like, this is going to be my DC. He's been telling teams that as he's
On
been
the interview
interviewing.
process.
Yeah, this is going to be my DC. So that likely is going to happen. All right, so here are the candidates real quick. In-house, I guess we can take Joe Witt Jr. off the list, but obviously he may have been the first candidate. But take him off the list. Al Harris Jr. Remember Al Harris as the secondary coach for them. Trevon Diggs put out a tweet saying Al Harris for DC, so he likes Al Harris a lot. There's Aiden Dirt, who is the D-line coach. So he knows the Dan Quinn system really well. If you're going outside the organization, Don Wink Martindale is available. Remember, he loves to blitz, and he knows the division from his time there in New York with the Giants. Sean Desai also knows division. Remember, he was fired by the Eagles after replacing Jonathan Gannon there. Ron Rivera, you mentioned him. Brandon Staley is still out there. Now, he interviewed with the Rams, I think, most recently. So that wouldn't make sense if the Rams kind of bring Brandon Staley back, but he's out there. He's a Vic Fangio disciple. Clint Hurt is another respected mind in the defensive community that is out there, and he's famously he took the Seahawks defense 2 years ago. He was a member of the Seahawks defense. Ejiro Evero, who was recently with the Panthers, but the new head coach there, Dave Canales, has not yet confirmed whether he is going to keep him as DC. There's a rumor that he will. Mike Zimmer has expressed interest that he would like that defensive coordinator position. Mike Pettin, who was famous, I think, most recently with the Browns. And he's in Green Bay, too. He's with Green Bay for a while as well. That's a name that's been out there. Shane Bowen, another name. So those are some of the names, and it will most likely be, I think, one of the most recognizable defensive coordinators. I think they'll probably go with a bigger name, like a Run. If they don't get Joe Witt Jr., they'll go with a Ron Rivera or
Mike Vrabel.
Zimmer or a Vrabel. They'll go to a big name.
Well, if Vrabel's interviewing, according to David Moore, and David Moore's been covering the Cowboys forever, that's reputable. If he is interviewing, that would tell you at least he's interested, and because all the head coaching jobs are now gone.
Yep.
And if you want to stay coaching, we just saw Dan Quinn go coach the Cowboys defense and land another head coaching job. If that's your path, Mike Vrabel would be interesting. But Mike Vrabel obviously would come with immediate threat to Mike McCarthy, because everybody would then say, maybe rightfully, that if you get off to a slow start, you've already got the replacement for McCarthy.
Maybe that's what Jerry Jones wants.
Maybe that's what he wants.
Maybe that's what Mike Vrabel wants.
Maybe so.
Right?
Maybe so.
Unfortunately for Mike McCarthy.
Yeah. So almost like Vrabel coming in to coach the defense to keep McCarthy, which is running the Tex Coast offense, but kind of everybody knows eventually Vrabel's going to, take control. I don't know. We'll see where that goes. Good stuff with Rod and the rant there. We'll keep an eye on that. That, according to Dallas Morning News and David Moore, that Vrabel will interview next week. I don't know if we have to wait till next week, but that's what David Moore says.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with E and Rod B. Text line's open, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776. Big fat poll of the day today. If you could add one player to your team, you can pick them from anywhere, but they got to be active now. It's all about right now, so we're not talking all time, but if you can pick one player and you say it's a trade or a transfer or whatever, and we get this guy, that's the guy, the one guy. Who would it be? 512-447-3776. That's the question of the day, the poll of the day. Send those in. We come back. We will get to some of those questions and answers right now on the text line, 512-447-3776. We get back here on the Sports Complex and the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. It's a 512 Friday where we play live music, local music. You can check out live around town this weekend. This is Lou Apollo. Lou Apollo, and he's playing Saturday at Central Machine Works. You can go check out Lou Apollo. Really good stuff from Lou Apollo. I believe friends in Black Odyssey and Juwan Elcock helped produce some of the stuff that Lou Apollo does. A bunch of good artists there in the group for Lou Apollo. Playing Saturday at Central Machine Works. Let's get to the text line. 512-447-3776. If you could add one player to your team, who would it be? We'll start off with Nate. Fred Warner to the Cowboys. You know what, Nate? That is straight to the point. That is a solid pickup that would very much help the team. I can't imagine anybody wanting to deal with Micah Parsons coming at you, and as you're running away from Micah Parsons, Fred Warner just takes you out. It seems like it would help out the Cowboys a little bit, but I don't think they're going to give up the 5-6 first they'd have to give up to pull him away. I don't think the 49ers are taking that phone call, but I like that. That is exactly the game we're playing, is who's the guy to help out your team, and for the Cowboys in the need is Fred Warner. I like that one. That's a good one. Texter says, R.I.P. Carl Weathers. Can't blame Happy Gilmore on it this time. Yes, rest in peace to Carl Weathers. You know, just I don't know. He's one of those actors that I don't ever really, I think he's one of those guys that you don't remember. You don't think of him being in all those movies that he's in, like you just, and then you're like, oh no, he was in that one, and he was in that one, and he's important in that one, and he's such a good actor that you don't necessarily think that he was in all of them, and of course an athlete too, and a football player and all that. Great life lived by Carl Weathers. Rest in peace to him passing away today. Dexter says, any team, Chuck Norris. How old is Chuck Norris now? I know the Chuck Norris jokes, but I feel like he might get hurt. I know we know Chuck Norris can do all these things. I have to Google now. I have to Google how old is Chuck Norris, because I feel like he must be getting up there now. He's been around for quite a while. 83 years old is Chuck Norris. And the Texas Rangers have added Chuck Norris to the roster. He's going to go out and can't get the ball to the mound. That is, I don't know if I'd be adding any 83-year-olds to my team. That's just me. Blake Snell or to the Stros. I like that one. That would definitely help them out and help out that rotation, get it back to where it needs to be. I mean, I am curious. I am very curious. We'll talk more baseball as we get closer to baseball, of course. I can't go too far into the weeds on drafting and all the offseason. Either it's, unless the big moves, we'll get into those. But I am curious if the Astros have worked and are going to be able to get through during the offseason to kind of get some of their pitchers who really seem to be affected by the pitch clock back to where they need to be, because a lot of those guys would just get frazzled early in the game. Luis Garcia too. He had to change his whole he had the whole Rocka baby and had to get rid of that because of the pitch clock. We'll see that. You also say or Bijan back. I think most college teams would love to have an NFL player back on their team. That would help out most college teams. Now, if you want to say Bijan to the Cowboys or Bijan to the Texans, I'm all on board with that one too. That makes either one of those teams exponentially better if you add that. Texter says, well, crap, I guess I'm going to have to start liking the Longhorns now. My twins just both got accepted into UT, signed a Red Raider. I hope you have oil money, sir, because good Lord, two of them trying to pay for UT for two of them. Either that or they're real good and they got scholarships, because holy moly, paying for two college tuitions seems like a lot of money in today's age. I don't know what it is anymore. I know it was really, really expensive 20 years when I was looking at it, and I can't imagine it's gotten cheaper. Also, Jose Altuve to the Rangers, so he stops being a Ranger killer. Jose, you know what? You can't have him. You can't have him. We like him too much in Houston. He's the best. I will always defend that guy with the baseless claims of his cheating when he wasn't. And when you look at the stats, and he was actually shutting it down, and in the story of how when you look at how small he is, and then the story of when the tryout first happened, and he went to the tryouts, and they were like, "There's no way you're old enough. You're not going to make it. You're too small." And he was basically kicked out without even playing. comes back, finds out that there's like the head scout's going to be there the next day, comes back the next day, goes basically directly to head scout with all his papers, with everything to be like, look, I'm old enough. Let me try out, go for the team. So they're like, cool. Yeah, you know what? Let's, somehow this guy got here and somehow people are saying he's halfway decent. Let's give him a shot. And of course, that guy turns into an MVP winner and a huge reason why the Astros got the titles. That is it's an amazing thing for Jose Altuve to be there. So I get it. I get that you'd want the little guy, but no, we're keeping him in Houston. Texter says, CeeDee Lamb, did you see those dodgeball skills? Where will you go with CeeDee Lamb to where? I don't know what team you're saying, because I assume most people on here are going to be Cowboys fans. I know we might have some Texans fans, so CeeDee Lamb to the Texans, I get that. But if you got another team on there, let me know what team you were sending CeeDee Lamb to. I'd like to think of where he's going and what his quarterback would be. I'd like to picture these scenarios in my head. Yeah, but I did not see the dodgeball skills. I didn't realize it was happening. Then I've recorded it, so I have it. So I'll watch it. I'll probably watch the skills competition at some point this weekend. I'll watch it because I'm a glutton for punishment. I do like some of them. Some of them I find really fun, and then other ones of them are not so great. And then the way they cut them up, and the announcers now, trying to make it more for TV is, I'm just like, just show me the thing, and I don't necessarily need all the flair in it. Just show me, the skills competition. The catching one is always kind of weird, and they're trying to make it a big deal because they're trying to make it the slam dunk contest, but you have to remind them that the slam dunk contest isn't even the slam dunk contest anymore. Just trying to remind the NFL of things, always what I try and do. Texter says, a new right tackle, but I don't know where. Are we talking Texas here? Are we talking Longhorns for the new right tackle? Because Christian Jones? I don't know. You got to give me a little bit more context for who you want the new right tackle for. I'm going to assume the Longhorns on that one. Possibly the Texans, possibly the Cowboys. Getting a right tackle over there, I don't know. Let me know who you want the new right tackle for. I appreciate that. Text line still rolling right along. 512-447-3776. Poll of the day. If you could add one player to your team, so any team that any NBA team to NBA team, NFL to NFL, you got to stay within your league, I believe. We're not going to say, because we can't say Bijan back to Texas. We know that does not work. So a new right tackle for the Cowboys. Okay. A new right tackle for the Cowboys. I like that. Yeah, but you guys, what do you want, like Sewell? You get him, I know he's a left tackle. You move him over to right, or you move him on left, and you take Tyler Smith, and you move him over to the right tackle now, and you get him ready to go. I think really, if you're going a new right tackle, you go, let's go get the best left tackle, and then take, Tyler Smith and move him over to right tackle and see if we can train him that way. That might be the way to go. Get one of those really good left tackles, because they seem to be really good. Go get one of them. But if you could add any one player to your team, who would it be? Let us know on the text line. 512-447-3776. We're going to take a quick break. We come back at the top of hour 2 of the show. We will get in, reset a little bit, talk a little bit more NFL football, talk a little bit more about Dan Quinn leaving, and a lot of the offensive coordinator position hirings and the rumors around there, and a lot of sources saying that these are done deals for some teams, and what it could mean, for the quarterback, and possibly that number 1 pick for Caleb Williams as well, or whatever the Bears are going to do with that pick. All of that we'll get to in hour 2 of the Sports Complex here on the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Hour 2 on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. Going to get into some more NFL talk. We've already talked some college basketball, some NBA, talked about the Longhorns' big matchup with TCU on Saturday, what they need to do. Another ranked team, another road test for a team that, it's maybe not the best team that Texas has had in the last few years, but it's a good team, and I believe in them. I believe. I know some of you don't, but I do. We've already talked about that. We'll get into the NFL, some more coaching news, offensive coordinators news coming out from a lot of different teams, a rumor about who Dan Quinn's offensive coordinator could be. All of that. And, of course, more of your text messages, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776 is the text line number. The poll of the day, if you could add one player to your team, who would it be? If you get NBA to NBA, NFL to NFL, college football to college football, wherever you want to add somebody and you say this is the perfect fit for this team, if somehow it aligned and somebody was asleep at the wheel and made a stupid trade and you gave up a first-round pick and all of a sudden you get this guy and they gave him up for nothing and he demanded a trade to your team, who's the one? Who's the one that you would say, that's the person I want? That's the person I want on my team. I like my man Nate said, Fred Warner to the Cowboys. And it's like, all right, that's dead on what I'm talking about there. I like that. And I was thinking about it because LeBron James, they've now denied rumors that he will be going anywhere for the Lakers. But for a long time in the NBA, that would have been the easy answer. We'll just add LeBron to any team, and they're automatically better. And they're automatically that, no matter whatever you need, you're probably LeBron will make you a better team. But now he is not. That's not the case anymore in the NBA. There's other people you'd want to add above him, but he was for a long time the guy that would be the answer to that question. So that's why I was thinking about it today, and I love that we're getting some action there on the text line. 512-447-3776. Keep those coming in. We'll get back to those in just a little bit. We will remind you, the East-West Shrine Bowl was last night. The West wins, walks away with it. The West was the team the Texas guys were on, so that's a good one. Jonathan Brooks, of course, was not participating due to injury. JT Sanders also opting out of playing in the game. Ryan Watts was the lone Longhorn performing in the game. 3 tackles in the game and allows 1 completion on 2 targets coming his way. Not a ton of action. Comes off the bench, but a good game for Ryan Watts and definitely doing nothing to hurt his draft stock. But I don't know how much he didn't have a great performance where he was able to run back an interception or something like that, which is pretty rare. But he was also on punt and kick coverages as well as one of those guys that you want to see as a safety, and in special teams is where you would get your start for a guy like Ryan Watts. So good to see him doing those things to show what he can do and try and get to the next level there. Senior Bowl is Saturday. You'll see Tavondre Sweat and Christian Jones in that. Christian Jones has been a riser in draft stock since he's gotten it, and Tavondre Sweat, somebody who was double-teamed a lot this season, and Byron Murphy is showing up on a lot of charts and a lot of mock drafts as being the higher pick right now and being the first pick for the Texas Longhorns. Tavondre Sweat is trying to show some people that he is a force to be reckoned with and needs to be seen. It'll be interesting to see if they double-team him or they try and go one-on-one and what he's able to do in that game. If he's able to get some penetration or hit some guys running the ball, see what Tavondre Sweat can do tomorrow in the Senior Bowl will definitely be a fun one to watch. We know Byron Murphy was out because of injury. He stepped out so he could get better for the Combine. Jalen Ford, Jordan Whittington both got accepted invites to the Senior Bowl, but will not be performing in the game, not playing in the game. So you'll watch for Tavondre Sweat and Christian Jones tomorrow. Other news coming out of college football today is that the Big Ten and the SEC have formed an advisory group. It looks like the first steps may be taking place to make that move that we've talked about, that's been rumored, that's been something that everybody kind of sees as what needs to happen in college football for there to be any actual authority that they mention in there with the lawsuits that the NCAA can't fight. That with everything happening in the transfer portal and people being worried about, the stress and the burnout on these coaches, where more and more coaches are going to want to go to the NFL than college football and all of that, then maybe in NIL and teams worried about the future of NIL. And then when you talk about revenue sharing and all of that, well, they're forming these meetings, and this could be the beginning of where the two major conferences, the two biggest football conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC, get together and basically tell the other guys, you've got to hop on board if you want to hop on board. But this is where we're going. We're going to form our own college football area. How can we start to find that? Find the legalities. Find out what you need to do to build for something that probably wouldn't exist for several more years. However, you have to start somewhere. And I think the two conferences talking together to realize that the NCAA managing college football does not seem to be sustainable at this point. And using college football in the same world as the rest of college basketball, and now with the travel that these teams are going to be doing and just everything around it, it seems more and more that we're getting to a point where you're not going to be able to continuing this, with everything going the way it is. So it means maybe we'll change. Maybe we'll get change coming up in the Big Ten, and the SEC will lead the way. In the ACC, we know that they have their issues where everyone's trying to sue their way out of there right now. And the Big 12 is actually doing okay. They're clearly doing better than the Pac-12. So those teams will be able to see what comes of that. But it's a big step that could mean a huge amount of change in college football. That is all speculation. That's all we have to wait and see. But it's good to see that they're starting to try and take steps, and that instead of the Big Ten and SEC fighting each other and trying to take power grabs and using the ACC and the Big 12 as pawns in their game, which they've done already, if they continue to do that, they may fight together and say, we're the two superpowers. We'll let DC and Marvel, or what's it, Justice League and the Super Friends. I don't know comic books enough. I was trying to make an analogy. I don't know, but maybe we say Batman and Superman. How about that? How about we go with that and say that those guys join together instead of trying to use this as a mean to get an upper hand, understanding the problems and working forward. I guess this is Nick Saban retires and everyone goes, crap, we can't let this continue. We let the goat is gone. We have to figure some things out now. And Nick Saban will probably be involved in some of those talks, in those, the advisory group. I'm sure he'll want to be somewhat involved in that about the future of college football. Also, shout out to the women. We should mention again, Texas women, big win over Baylor last night, 67-55. Big win for the Texas women. So shout out to the Texas women for getting a big win last night. Let's hit some NFL talk, and we'll get back to the text line. 512-447-3776. Keep those coming in. If you could get any player, if you could add one player from any team to your team, who would it be? Take one from the other, like a transfer or trade. Who's the one? Any sport, I'll let you go. And I'd love it if you tell me why, too. But, yes, that's the poll of the day, so throw that in. Also, if you want to talk Texas basketball, if you want to talk NBA, Spurs, Rockets, Mavericks, if you want to talk some NFL, if you want to talk Super Bowl, any of that, send in a text, 512-447-3776. Some news coming out. The Saints are expected now to hire Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator, yet another person from that Shanahan tree. Of course, his dad, Gary Kubiak, was coached at the Broncos and was a big part of Mike Shanahan's teams. So no surprise that he is part of that family growing up, and he is now expected to go get his offensive coordinator position. He was one of the names that came up a lot when the Texans were looking to hire their offensive coordinator position with DeMeco Ryans, another name out of San Francisco. But man, that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree is growing under the bloom of the Mike Shanahan coaching tree. It is definitely growing right now if he ends up going to the Saints as expected. The Titans are expected to hire Nick Foles, another coach there. You can go get your guy that he is a fast riser, came up with the Jaguars last year. He's expected to be the offensive coordinator for the Titans now under Brian Callahan. Also, they're expecting to bring in Brian Callahan Sr., his dad, or Bill Callahan, sorry. They're trying to bring him in as well. That is expected to be happening for the Titans as they build their staff. It seems like they're not spending a ton of money. They're kind of going a little bit under the radar. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but just something to note when you see with the Titans that they may not be breaking the bank to try and compete with the Jaguars and the Titans. And the Texans, they may also be waiting to see if Will Levis is the guy, because if you kind of go in, and Will Levis did pretty well last season when he came in, that was the rookie they drafted last season. if Will Levis is the guy in Tennessee and Callahan's able to make him take him to that next step, then I think you may go a little bit more all in Tennessee, but they may be waiting back to say, well, we don't necessarily want to throw everything out there and then find out we don't have a quarterback. So that may be going there. And then we can throw it over to the Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders have now decided that they are looking to bring in their offensive coordinator. They brought in Marvin Lewis as an assistant head coach, bring in a former head coach with a lot of experience to help out Antonio Pierce, kind of guide him through the daily meetings, just everything that goes into being a head coach in the NFL, helping Antonio Pierce grow into that role. I think it's a good idea to bring somebody in when you're bringing in a ex-player with not a ton of coaching experience. And so they brought him in, and it looks like they will be hiring Cliff Kingsbury as their new offensive coordinator. And it leads you to believe now, for the quarterback position in Las Vegas, if you get Cliff Kingsbury, does that mean that they may be looking at any way they can to leverage the franchise to go get Caleb Williams? We know we listened to the clip earlier. The rumor is Caleb Williams doesn't want to play in Chicago. Chicago has not, gone one way or another. It feels like they have to make this decision at some point sooner rather than later. If you're keeping Justin Fields, where it feels like they're going to keep Justin Fields, so you're going to trade that number 1 pick. They may just be shopping the number 1 pick behind the scenes. Number 13 is where Antonio Pierce and the Raiders are drafting, and that is a long way to go to get all the way up to number 1, but it could happen. There's stranger things have happened, and you may have to leverage your future of the Raiders to bring him in. And does Antonio Pierce feel okay with leveraging his future and the new organization, the new general manager, and everybody in Las Vegas to say, we're going all in. We think this is the guy. We think he would be the quarterback of the future. We think he'd love to be in Vegas. We think he'd love to play in our system, and he'd love to play with Devontae Adams, one of the best wide receivers in the league. Can we go out and get him? And that would be an interesting look. The Raiders could pull that off. You bring in Cliff Kingsbury, and he already works in a system that Caleb Williams knows. And it leads you to the point, though, for the Raiders, if you don't get Caleb Williams, you can't trade up. Where do you get your quarterbacks? And when you start to look at the quarterbacks and the needs in the NFL right now. Now, when you look around the league right now, there's a few teams that need quarterbacks. The Atlanta Falcons clearly need a quarterback. Chicago needs to figure out what they're doing. Now they're sitting pretty because they have a decent quarterback in Justin Fields. We don't know how good. We don't know if he's going to be able to get over that hump with his new offensive coordinator, if they're going to be able to change things up and get him going. Denver clearly needs another quarterback. Russell Wilson is going to be ousted there. I don't think Stidham's going to be the guy, so where do you go with that? The Raiders got to find their next guy. Garoppolo, that was a Josh McDaniels thing. I don't think that's working out. Minnesota has questions to answer. Do you keep Kirk Cousins? Do you go and re-sign him, or do you go get somebody else? The Patriots, of course, have got to find their guy, but they've got to pick high enough in there. They got a top 3 pick, so they will most likely get whatever quarterback sitting there at 3. They can go after them. Tampa Bay has the question of with Baker Mayfield. Do you hold it on, run it back one more year, and then just kind of stay out of the problem because you made the playoffs? That's probably the most likely scenario for a Tampa Bay. You may just walk away from that one and say, we don't. Maybe you draft a quarterback a little bit later in the draft in the 5th, 6th round, take a flyer on somebody and see what they can do. The Commanders, in desperate need of a quarterback, assume they'll take one in the draft. Then you have the Giants. You have Pittsburgh. You have Seattle that have quarterbacks but aren't sure that they're franchise quarterbacks anymore. You got new coach in Seattle. You got a new offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh. We know Kenny Pickett was losing his starting job to Mason Rudolph at the end of the year. What does Arthur Smith want to do? We know he was pissed off not having a quarterback last year, so he's going to play whoever's third string, we guess. But that's the question there. The Giants have paid all this money to Daniel Jones. They've got to keep him for now, but do you try and go up and draft a quarterback? Do you sign somebody else for competition? Do you say, screw it, we need to get one? Brian Daboll, go get somebody? In Seattle, new coach there. What do you bring in? If you're Seattle, do you keep Geno Smith for another year? Or do you think that his numbers started to sag last season and maybe we know they wrote him off and he didn't write back, but is he starting to write? We'll see if Seattle has that. So a lot of teams could be looking for quarterbacks. Again, this goes for all you Dallas Cowboys fans who hate Dak Prescott. This is the reality. There's not a ton of quarterbacks out there that you can't get that are not going to be in the draft, and a lot of teams that are probably going to be trying to go to the draft to get a quarterback. So if we look at who is available, you figure Justin Fields will end up either being a trade bait and they take Caleb Williams, but one quarterback's off the board with Justin Fields. Either it's him or it's Caleb Williams. Kirk Cousins is a free agent. You assume Minnesota's going to re-sign him. Baker Mayfield, you assume that Tampa Bay, after the season he had, would re-sign him, right? So you assume that those guys are off the board now. Now, who's your other available quarterbacks? If we say Justin Fields stays in Chicago and Baker Mayfield stays in Tampa Bay and Kirk Cousins stays as a Viking, well, now we're down to Russell Wilson, Gardner Minshew, and Jacoby Brissett. That's who you got. Now, we know Gardner Minshew's probably going to move on. I know he's a Pro Bowler now. He's iconically a Pro Bowler. That they ran out of quarterbacks, and he gets in. And I'm not taking a shot at Gardner Minshew. It's just they ran out of quarterbacks, so he got him. But we figure he probably will leave Indianapolis after, they want to use Anthony Richardson and grow with him. I feel like they feel like he's going to be the starter next season. So that'll leave Gardner Minshew trying to find a spot. Where does he end up? He's not a franchise guy, but he's a good quarterback. He's a stopgap if you can't draft someone this season. Because Gardner Minshew, where does he end up? And Jacoby Brissett, another stopgap guy that you get in, not a franchise. So if you're looking at that in the quarterback race, if you're Las Vegas and you're saying at 13, well, our available options are Russell Wilson, Jacoby Brissett, and Gardner Minshew. We kind of want to trade up in the draft if I'm Cliff Kingsbury, because I don't want one of those guys. I want to trade up and try and go get somebody good, or I can go out and take whoever I'm going to take at that position. We assume Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels are top 3 picks, right? We assume that's where they're going, that those 3 will be your top 3 quarterbacks off the board. That is the assumption. So even if the Bears don't take number 1, that whoever trades up, and if that's the Raiders, if you want one of those guys that is a young, believable franchise quarterback that is a possibility to be that, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. Now we get into the categories for quarterbacks. Michael Penix Jr. Do you believe he can stay healthy? Do you believe that you're going to get a Michael Penix Jr. that we saw as Texas fans and hated? Or are you going to get the Michael Penix Jr. that Michigan saw and, doesn't look like a first-round pick to me in the Michigan game, looked like a first overall pick against Texas? I know we can complain about our defense, but that Michael Penix Jr., where does he end up? J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix. Then there's Michael Pratt and Jordan Travis. Those guys. Is this somebody, if you're one of these teams, are you going to take a shot on one of these guys? And the Commanders, you assume we're going to get one of the top guys as well. You assume they're getting Drake May probably, maybe Jaden Daniels. But a question to be asked there, they're looking at their new offensive coordinator as well. And there's rumors that one of the guys who could be looking to get out of the grind of college football right now, even though he's a head coach and making really good money, could be looking to get out of the grind, maybe move out of L.A., is Chip Kelly. It's Chip Kelly who maybe wants to redeem himself in NFL action after, did not do well in the NFL before. Maybe he's learned a little bit more. He wants to come back. And the theory would be Dan Quinn's kind of an out there, different guy, but he's a defensive guy. Maybe you bring in Chip Kelly as your offensive hire and make a splash in Washington, because the Dan Quinn hire wasn't the splash you wanted. Chip Kelly would definitely be a splash. Maybe not a good one. Maybe that splash when you're fully dressed and holding your phone and someone does a cannonball and you're like, bro, what's going on? Maybe that splash. But interesting to see what happens there in Washington as well with Chip Kelly. Those are all the interesting points that I was looking at today when you're trying to figure out where the quarterback position is going to go, and when the hiring of Cliff Kingsbury in Las Vegas, does that mean that the Raiders could be making a move to try their hardest? And it's a Mark Davis thing, man. What do you want, 17 first? Sure, why not? We'll throw it all away to go get a quarterback and then not be able to build afterwards. We already went for Devontae Adams to put him with his college roommate, and then it ends up that we got rid of his college roommate because of a coach that we shouldn't have hired in the first place. We'll go all in again. Why not? We keep going all in. Jerry Jones doesn't know how to go all in. Mark Davis does. Little update there in the NFL. Why don't we take a quick break? We'll come back, get into some of the text on the text line. The poll of the day you can throw in there is, if you could add one player to your team, who would it be? Any sport you want to throw in there. And if you guys have any takes of where you think the quarterbacks are going to end up, throw me. If you got a hot take of where you think a quarterback will end up, do you think that Vegas will be able to trade up for number one, or do you think Vegas is going to get stuck with somebody else? They have to go. Maybe Vegas ends up with Gardner Minshew. Vegas ends up with a Michael Penix. Maybe they end up with a J.J. McCarthy or somebody like that. What do you guys think? Let us know on the text line 512-447-3776. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back, get to that text line here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn on a 512 Friday where we play local music. You can go check out live around town this weekend. This is the South Austin Moonlighters. Awesome band, the South Austin Moonlighters, playing tomorrow night at Saxon Pub. You can go check them out. I think Malford Milligan's playing tomorrow night at Saxon Pub too. Going to be a fun night tomorrow night at Saxon Pub. If you want to go check that out. South Austin Moonlighters right there. Good stuff. Check them out. Go give them a listen. They're on whatever app or whatever you use, or go buy a record too. Why not? Some good stuff there from the South Austin Moonlighters. Always supporting local music. We try. I hope you guys try too. It's a great part of Austin, a great reason to be here. Texter. This is the texter who says that he's got his twins going to UT, and I asked him I hope he had oil, and he says he's a disabled vet, so using the Hazelwood Act, otherwise I'd be so broke. Hey, man, thank you for your service, and that is a good thing. That is a good thing that you are not having to pay those tuitions and getting some help to do that. That is a lofty goal. The lofty goal here in 2024. Bevo Angel answering our poll of the day. If you could have any player, if you could add one player to any of your teams, add a player, who would it be? Bevo Angel says Mahomes to Denver so he can win the division and be championship contenders again. Yeah, I agree that would be if you take him away from the Chiefs and add him to the Broncos. I think that would definitely help. I don't know though. He has guys. The Broncos also have dropping the ball problems. He may be upset again. Another Mahomes there. Mahomes to the Steelers. Yeah, that would be crazy. Him and Mike Tomlin. I feel like you don't want to bet against Mike Tomlin at least getting to the playoffs. And if you get to the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes feels like he's going to win. They may win the next, 15 Super Bowls if they do that. If you put him on the Steelers. I know my Bills fan buddy would love to have Justin Tucker. Yes. I'm sure Bills fans. And I don't wish that on Justin Tucker though. That feels like a just accident waiting to happen if he ended up on the Bills. Let's see another text. Derrick Henry to the Texans. That's an interesting one. That one could happen too. That one is a very realistic option of happening this offseason. I'm not sure that's where they would go. I think there's some other guys like Josh Jacobs to the Texans also would be insane. That would be a huge get. I don't know if they're going to try and go after that way, but he is a really good running back as well. And Connor Bedard to the Maple Leafs. I am not up enough on hockey. I do know the name Connor Bedard. I know who the Maple Leafs are, but I'm going to assume he was he the number 1 overall pick this year? Is that who I'm thinking of? If he was, then yes, that would help out, I'm sure. Texter says McCarthy to Washington to be Dan's OC, then hire Bilby as head coach and bring in Vrabel as DC. I like that. Just changing it all up. Go for it. I honestly, I'm not opposed to it. I still, and I want to see Bill Belichick and Jerry Jones work together because as someone in media, it seems like it would be a lot of fun. Texter also says, does it worry anybody that Caleb Williams could be too much to handle for any organization in the long run, referring to him already asking to be a part owner of whatever team drafts him has to be at least throw up some flags? I do. I think that there's going to be some people that come in and, once he gets to the league, once the recruitment is over and everything, we get past it, I think there may be a little bit more of trying to give him a little bit more of a dose of reality. A lot of the stuff we hear too, it seems to be coming from his father. That his father's like, no, you're the best player. We should be able to go get this, and you're the best player. We should be able to go get that. That they may try and squash some of that up front. But it depends, too, because, we talk about the Raiders leveraging their future. If someone leverages their future to get him, then he holds a lot of cards because now you're pot committed to having him, and so whatever he wants, you get. I don't think it's a huge worry. I think you think that he showed up at USC. He played all the games. He's done everything he's supposed to do, and there's a lot of talk behind it. But I don't know if it's one of those ones where it's a lot of talk until you say, is he really going to sit out? Is he really going to do that? Texter says, the problem says Dak to the Niners, Jerry to the Commanders. All right, another Cowboys fan trying to get out there. The problem with the Caleb Williams is similar problem to Kyler Murray. Neither of them has ever really fit into a system because they like to go off script and create, which generally doesn't work very well in the NFL. And that's mostly because neither of those players read defense particularly well or even patient enough to go through the progressions. That's somewhat true, and it doesn't always work well. Some guys it does. Patrick Mahomes goes off script all the time. And it seems to work okay for him. Now, he has Travis Kelce. And the Raiders traded Darren Waller, and he couldn't stay healthy anyway. But, with Devontae Adams, you may be able to work something out there as well. If you're Vegas. Now, again, on the Bears, I don't think he's going to be on the Bears. I think they keep Justin Fields, and I know that's a hard miss, but it seems like something where they won't be doing it. But yeah, no, he is one of those guys. And again, you're going to try and get him into more of a system. We know that Lincoln Riley was trying to get him into more of a system, and it works really well in college. I agree with that. It's not the same in the pros for a lot of guys. Textile says, Sean Payton to the Cowboys after we fire McCarthy. Your thoughts? I don't think that will happen now. I think Sean Payton is in Denver, and he's got to turn that around. And if he turns that around, he'll be there for a long time. And if he doesn't, then you're not necessarily wanting to go out and get him either because he's not shown. I think that there's other guys. The Bill Belichick name would come up again next year if he's ousted. There will be other names available, and college coaches could be still trying to jump to the pros. They could go that route as well, and they could look at a Lincoln Riley. That name's come up a number of times as well. That could be somebody that the Cowboys look at that I would think would be more likely than trying to go and trade for a Sean Payton. And Nate, I can't read those. I can't read those. I appreciate it, though. I want to play you some sound, though, from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B. Another little replay there. Going behind the burnt orange curtain with Rob Babers here on a Hook 'em Up replay on the Sports Complex.
All right, let's get into the big news, and it's a big loss for Texas, frankly. Billy Glasscock, who was Texas Director of Player Personnel, leaving to go to Ole Miss. Ole Miss this offseason, making some moves.
They find a sugar daddy somewhere?
They got plenty of them because Ole Miss right now, I think they may have been one of the, if not the top transfer portal acquisition class in college football. Is definitely one of the best. And Lane Kiffin, who was really close with Sark, they're really close friends. He ends up stealing Sark's Director of Player Personnel. I guess it ain't personal, Sark, but I need that guy. So Billy Glasscock moving on to Ole Miss, leaving Austin for Oxford. He's taken over as the general manager for Ole Miss. He's going to be in title, the general manager, and maybe that's what he wanted. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Sark could have made him the general manager. We know now Chip Kelly has a general manager. Well, it looks like Ole Miss is going to have one too. He's basically the GM for Texas, all right, of their personnel department. He's the one that coordinates the recruiting of the high school prospects, transfer portal prospects. He basically creates the big board and lets all the coaches know where their assignments are and where they need to be recruiting and in what areas they need to be recruiting, what players they need to be highlighting. And he started his career, memories in junior college, kind of rose up through the ranks just off of just his merit. His Arizona Western and Joliet Junior College in the recruiting operations as assistant there. And then he went to strength and conditioning. And then he was at Northern Illinois for 2 years. And that's really where his career started to skyrocket. And he followed Jerry Kill, member from Northern Illinois, to Minnesota. And he was their director of recruiting operations. And he was like, a national director of recruiting operations. I think he won an award for being the best recruiting director in the country along those lines. So he was one of the best recruiting directors in the country. And then that's when he went to North Carolina State a couple of years later. Then that's when Sark found him. And by then he had developed a reputation for being a guy who had a really good eye for talent. Just had a great eye for talent, got a great eye for talent in a unique sense of roster construction, depending on the vision of the coach. That you could give him your vision and that he could start to formulate a plan for roster construction. And he did a great job at Texas. I mean, you had top 5 classes every year that he was here, basically. You look at it overall. Number 4 recruiting class this year, number 3 in 2023, number 5 in 2022. I mean, Texas has been stacking classes, so that's a big loss. And I wonder if Brandon Harris just ends up being promoted from within. I know he's been working with the staff there for a long time, and he's right. If I'm not mistaken, I'll go look at it. I believe he's right under Billy Glasscock. Billy Glasscock. I believe he's right under him. So that could be a promotion from within, to watch that.
Interesting, yeah. And Brandon Harris has been there a while.
He's been there a while. He's passed up some jobs too.
He has.
He's gotten offered. I don't want to. I don't want to lie about it, but he's gotten offered a couple of jobs. And he's passed on those to stay at Texas. I believe one in the league too. Let me go look at it to make sure. But yeah, so I can think that would be a nice hire to kind of keep the continuity. Sark's big on continuity. That would be a big continuity guy.
Yeah, for sure. And someone who already knows the lay of the land. And Brandon Harris, if you remember, correct me if I'm wrong, like when they've had coaching vacancies for a spell, he would drop in and
take over the recruiting.
Help
yes,
recruit,
he
right?
did that with the D-line position.
D-line,
Yep,
yeah.
great point.
So yeah,
Great
so
point.
obviously has the trust of the coaching staff and Sark for sure. That would be interesting. But yeah, Ole Miss is making moves in the SEC. Obviously,
Yeah,
Lane Kiffin, he has been as vocal as any, complaining about, or complaining is probably the wrong word, but at least pointing out that the haves and the have-nots and the arms race and in the NIL space. And now his all of a sudden, his arms are growing.
I think that he's decided, and I think wisely, hey man, if you can't beat them, join them. And I mean, you can complain about it, and Sark doesn't complain, but Sark talks about wanting guidelines and wanting better guardrails and more checks and balances in the system now. NIL transfer talks about it all the time, actually, but he is still all in on those means and ways to acquire talent and to improve his team. You have to be, and until the federal government comes in or Uncle Sam comes in and decides there's a federal law that there's more unanimity in terms of the NIL space, and it's not a state law thing, state to state, you might as well take advantage of it. Guys, right now is the best time in the history of college football to be a student athlete. It might be a student athlete period, but I think be a college football player. I'm just talking about my experience, because sooner or later there will be guardrails. Sooner or later there will be a uniform law, NIL law, that everybody's got to operate by. It's going to happen. Either the federal government will do it, or the powers that be in college football will decide, hey, we're operating by this NIL rule, and they'll just, I don't know if they're going to emancipate themselves from the NCAA, whatever. It's going to happen. But in this period now, while it is kind of the Wild Wild West, go. Go.
Well, I mean, I think that's been the
do it, man. And I think that's what Lane Kiffin's doing too, and Sark's doing it too.
Yeah, and they both, and Sark has said that, right? I mean, you can not like a situation, but you have to thrive within it. While is how it is, right? It just is. Dabo Swinney over at Clemson has taken the opposite of that. Is I don't like this and I'm not doing it. I mean, still to this moment, Clemson has not added one portal player through the offseason.
That is insane.
I mean, you can take a stand on things, but is that what's best for your program right now?
That's insane. I can't believe that.
I mean, because I would
that's
bet
malpractice. That's malpractice.
100%. I would bet if you're Steve Sarkisian and Dabo Swinney and you sat down and talked about the ills of college football, they'd probably be in pretty close alignment. But you can complain about it, or you can play within the rules as they are stated today. And try to get them fixed and be an advocate for change. But at the same time, you can't let your program fall behind because you're not participating in this free market, essentially.
That's exactly
and actually discouraging against it. That's not going to. I mean, it is.
Yeah, openly discouraging against it. So players are like, well, I don't want to go there. Guys doesn't believe in NIL, doesn't believe in the transfer portal.
Yeah. And again, it's one thing to take a stand. And I remember, and we've really drawn the parallels with Mack Brown and Dabo Swinney when Mack was at the end of his run at Texas. And I remember Mack Brown being like furious when we're talking about general managers now in college football, Ron. Mm-hmm. It was Nick Saban who started that whole thing. When Nick Saban came back from the Miami Dolphins from the NFL, he looked around and said, well, look, I'm looking for an advantage here. There's no rule against having front offices. Support staff.
Yep.
You can only have 10 coaches that can recruit and go out and recruit on the road and be on the field on game day, but you can have as many support staff as you want. So if you can pay for it, you can hire them. And so, man, what an advantage in the NFL to have GMs and scouts and front office personnel to handle a lot of the daily work.
Yep.
So he started to form that. And Mack Brown was so against that.
He was.
So against that.
He wanted to be mom and pop shop.
Yeah. Well, and guess who copied him? Urban Meyer at Ohio State, Dabo Swinney at Clemson. They started doing this, and Mack Brown fell behind. That started like 07, 08 when Nick Saban came back from Alabama. I mean, that's a long time ago now. But at the same time, it's the same thing. You have to evolve within your whatever your profession is. You cannot like the situation, but you also have to evolve within it.
Yeah,
to thrive.
That's a great point. You're right about that. That's why Dabo, when people were bringing up the candidates to replace Nick Saban, I was like, you can't go Dabo. He's just too anti-modern college football right now. He's spoken out vehemently against it, and his actions actually have followed that. Sark has spoken out against it, but Sark's actions are that, hey, I'm all in. I wish there were some guardrails, but for now, I am all in. Okay, so I got it from shout out to Bruce Feldman tweeted this out in 2021. Texas Director of Recruiting Brandon Harris, who interviewed for a job with the Rams,
Oh,
has
wow.
opted to remain at UT.
Sean McVay.
Because he was really close. Yes, Sean McVay liked him, so it means he's sharp. He's a smart dude. And yes, I'm not sure. It's some stuff saying here it might have been for an assistant quarterback's job. Because remember, he's a quarterback.
Yes.
So that wasn't necessarily a front office job or a scouting job, but said he's a smart young man and has been coveted elsewhere, and I'm sure he's probably been coveted for front office positions at other spots, but he has turned down some jobs. He wants to be at Texas, and maybe this is the reason that he wanted to be here because he knew that Billy Glasscock was his guy. He was at one point he was going to ascend to another job too, because he really hadn't been at any place that long. He builds it, and then he moves on.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B. A replay. They are on weekday morning, 6 to 11 right here on The Horn. Of course, you can find thehornfm.com and the Horn app. You can find the podcast if you want to go listen to more of that. All right. Why don't we take a quick break? We'll come back, wrap it up, hit the rest of the text on the text line, and get out of here on a Friday afternoon and go enjoy the weekend. The weather's not great, but who cares? It's Friday. It's Friday. It's Friday. We'll take you back and wrap up the show here on the Sports Complex when we come back. Sports Complex, 1019, Horn, 1019. AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. All right, we got to get out of here. A couple last texts we got. WAPI Parts Guy says Jay Witt to the Texans. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to that at all. And random texter number 69 says, any other quarterback to the Chiefs, obviously not a KC fan, just to bring any semblance of balance to the universe. If Mahomes keeps winning there after going, didn't he previously below 500 team, then I guess he is. He gets the undisputed GOAT title with ever actually having to beat Brady in the playoffs. You don't have to beat him to be the GOAT. He's not there yet. He's got to win some more rings. We'll see if he does it next weekend. Appreciate all you guys hanging along. We'll be back on Monday to discuss Texas hopefully getting a big win. We'll get more into Super Bowl week and break down the matchup and do all that fun stuff all next week as well. As we keep the party rolling here on another week of the Sports Complex, coming back on Monday. Until then, be kind, be safe, have a great weekend, keep your underwear clean. We'll see you next week for more of the Sports Complex.